Hello everyone, my name is Praveen and I welcome you all to my YouTube channel Java Fun. Today, and this is the fourth lecture in the Docker for Beginners series, and we're going to talk about Docker installation. So today we're going to see mainly how to install Docker onto the Windows machine or onto the Mac machine. Also, we're going to see for the Windows machines, if you are working on the latest Windows versions such as Windows 10, how to install it, and if you are working on a legacy Windows versions, which is prior to Windows 10, how you're going to install the Docker into it. Okay, so without further ado, let's begin with it. So Docker for Windows, right? So with the latest versions of Docker, they have come up with something called as Docker Desktop, which is something like running the Docker natively both on Mac as well as on Windows. So this Docker Desktop comes for both Mac and Windows, but it has to satisfy certain minimum hardware and software requirements into it, right? So for Windows specifically, these are the requirements which is there for Docker to run on Windows. Minimum you need to have a Windows 7, 8, 8.1, and the latest one which has been coming into Windows 10, right? Minimum 2 GB RAM, and the virtualization has to be enabled. So we'll see what is virtualization is. One thing which is not shown into this particular thing is Windows 10. So if you're going on Windows 10, you can run the Docker as a native process onto the Windows machines, right? So how you can do that? Let's see. Basically, if you go to Google and type Docker for Windows install, it's gonna give you a link, and you can come to this page. Basically, it is telling you how you can install the Docker Desktop for Mac as well as for Windows. Now, if you're running it for Windows, the minimum requirements, system requirements are like you have to be on Windows 10, and it has to be 64-bit, 4 GB RAM, to basically install the Docker Desktop. Something that we saw, 2 GB RAM, it is for something called as Docker toolset. That's what we're going to see. This is for the legacy Windows machines, right? And the virtualization has to be enabled. So if you want to see for your Windows machine if the virtualization has been enabled or not, simply what you can do is you can basically go to Task Manager and go to a Performance tab into your Task Manager, and there you can see whether the virtualization has been enabled or not for your machine. So if you go to Performance tab, and I'm running on a Windows machine, here the highlight, the cursor what I'm showing right now, it is showing me the virtualization has been enabled. So this has to be enabled for your machine. If it is not enabled, then probably you may not be able to run the Windows onto your may not be able to run the Docker onto your machine. Okay, so this is a minimum requirement. Now if you are running it, if you are on Windows 10 and 10 and above versions, basically, you can directly come to this one and go to Docker Hub and start installing it. Basically, just a download of installer and just running it. Basically, once you install it, it basically gives you a GUI wherein you can specify the resources and the other settings for it. You can specify how much CPU, memory, and all those things you can allocate for that Docker process or the Docker containers. It does comes with the Kubernetes installer as well inside it. So it is basically installing both the Kubernetes as well as the Docker into it. So this is all fine. This is mainly for Windows 10 and above, and similarly it will be for Mac. But what I'm going to show you is if you want to run it for versions which is prior to Windows 10, how you're going to do it. So for that, what you can do is you can go to this particular Git link, which is going to give you the installers or the exe files for Docker Toolbox. And this is something which has not been maintained by Docker right now. But if you absolutely have to run it, if you're stuck on the versions of Windows which is prior to Windows 10, this is the only option that you can have it. From here, you can directly download the exe and just run it. That's it. I done the same thing for my machine because I'm not on Windows 10. Just download it and run it. One thing I've noticed is that some of the very latest version which has been there, like the latest one is July 31, 2019, right? So there was some issue if you run the latest version. So what I did is I'm basically taken the Feb 13 version. So the first two version, which one is in March and another one is in July, that is not working properly. So I would suggest you go to this particular version. 18.09 and 09.2, which has been released on Feb 13, 2019, and try to install this particular exe. Once you install that, it's just like a normal Windows machine, right? It will install basically three things onto your machine. One is Docker Quick Start Terminal, Kitematic, and another one is a Oracle VirtualBox. So Oracle VirtualBox is nothing but it is giving a virtualization feature for your Windows, because Docker is all natively run into Linux machines, right? So to run it on Windows, what you need to do is you basically install something called as Oracle VM, which is VirtualBox Manager. What it will do is it will basically create a Linux machine, the Linux instance on top of your Windows machine, on which you can run a Docker daemon. So once you install that, the simply what you can do is you can click on this Docker Quick Start Terminal and it will install everything for you. If you're doing it for the first time, it will take a little bit of time, but that should be okay, I guess. After 5 or 10 minutes, Docker should be up and running onto your machine. And what I've done is I've started the Docker Quick Start Terminal again. So it is going to take a little bit of time before it boots up. So let's wait for a while, and then we'll see how we can interact with the Docker daemon. So till the time it's boots up, right? How we're going to interact with the Docker onto our machine is basically something we discussed in the earlier lectures as well. So this is how it's going to interact. So this Docker Quick Start Terminal is your Docker CLI, which is your command line interface, wherein you will be typing different Docker commands. So it is starting now. It started, okay. And once you type a command, so I'm typing a Docker version right now. It basically interacts with the REST API, right? It makes a REST API call, and the REST API internally makes a Docker daemon call. So you cannot directly talk to a Docker server or a Docker daemon. You basically will only be interacting to a Docker using a set of commands, and the commands internally making a REST API calls. So this is how the Docker has been set up as of now. So I done Docker version, and as you can see, it is giving me a successful output. It means it has been installed properly on my machine, right? So that is from the installation perspective. In the next lecture, we're going to see the images in detail, because images is the most important thing in Docker, right? So see you on the next side. So I'll encourage you to go ahead and try these things, even if you don't have the latest machines on Windows, or if you're on Mac. I mean, that's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and install it directly. But if you're on Windows, try the Docker Toolbox to interact with it. So see you on the next lecture, wherein we talk about the images in complete detail. Thanks for tuning in.